Hello, everyone, for today's session that focuses on Integration Central as part of the SMAX September event of 2022. For the ones who know me, they will know that I'm not so much it. So my name is Philipp Koch. We had a last-minute switch of presenter in the first section here. So that's just the first icebreaker that I'm using. So we're going to talk through the summary and the setup of what we mean when we refer to Integration Central, what it stands for, what's the value add and the benefits, what kind of connectors we have today. As an introduction, takes 20 to half an hour of the duration to go through that. And then we'll switch over to Jan Stoibe, who is going to do a live demonstration of the integration engine in itself, in showcasing you how it works, how it's structured in the live product. So it's not pre-recorded, it's actually live on a real system, where we can demonstrate you what we are actually trying to improve when it comes to the Integration Central in the ESM or the SMAX product. When you have questions, please write them up. We like to take them live. I have colleagues with me from the team that will help us in also interrupting me when I present, so we can actually answer those questions live. So please do not hold back and do throw in the questions that you have. It might be that some of the questions we have to postpone to an offline follow-up, depending on what the question is. It might be too broad for the session today, but we'll of course let you know when we go through the questions in different sections through the session today. Today, as a change towards the other sessions, we have a bit of a longer interaction with you guys. We're doing a 1.5 hour, at least that's the plan, and not just a short half an hour, because the topic is too broad to squeeze into half an hour. It would be too much, or it would be too fast and too fast-paced to give it justice. So we decided to make it a longer session for today. So with no further ado, let's dive in. So the SMAX integration engine, which is the engine that represents what we call out as Integration Central sometimes, is something that is rather new inside the SMAX ecosystem. It is inside SMAX in itself. It's not an external solution. For some of you, you might know, for example, Connect IT or other solutions from third-party vendors that do something similar. We've had a very clear choice that we want to have it inside the ecosystem of SMAX to be able to easily integrate with third parties and Micro Focus products. And that integration engine is also there to support the use cases for other product lines like AMX and HCMX, because they're all running from the same platform. There's a few defining elements that we wanted to stick to and adhere to from a policy, from an approach towards that integration engine. One of them is it is supposed to be low code, and it is a low code, no code UI. You will see that in the live demo and in some of the print screens that I will have in my section, that you will see how easy we made it to utilize this. So you do not have to go into a coding solution, write your code and compile it, etc., etc. It is really there to be able to write this without having a coding education. Then the second piece, which is the middle box here, the whole integration engine in itself has predefined templates. And those predefined templates are all here to help you jumpstart integrations, to make your life easier to go and grab something that is delivered either out of the box or from a marketplace, as a jumpstart capability, so you can get started. But we are not locking those templates to say that's the only way you can do it. It is supposed to be a jumpstart. So you can add on to it or modify it if you wish so, to improve and further extend the use of the integration engine. And all of this approach will then lead us, or it is here to help you reduce the amount of errors when it comes to integrations, because it's pre-templated and controlled. It is guided in the low-code, no-code approach, that you're actually writing it in a way that you will see that you can drag and drop parameters and variables that you define to reduce errors. It is simplifying your work, first of all, because you have it in one solution and you don't need to go into a middleware external. And of course, an integration engine and the ease of use of it will overall ultimately increase your overall automation level, that you can further automate and benefit from automating through the integration and integration capabilities that we give you with the integration engine. So quick overview of the integration templates. I'll come a little bit into more details of those in the next few slides. So as you can already see here in the print screen, there's a whole set of possible templates that are already there out of the box. You can also see it on the right-hand side with the call out of the third-party vendors as well as our own. So we've added on quite a few templates and integrations, pre-configured integration settings for our products. And that is not just in the item space, it is also going towards the ADM space, the application development with Octane, Quality Center, or even ArcSight, which is in our security space. So we are expanding on all of those. I can already say that now as a forward-looking statement. This is not the final set. This is the set that we have available today. We are expanding to more of our own products. So for example, just to take one top of my head, PPM is one that is on the list, or improving the integration with OpsBridge through the integration engine instead of using the current integration, which has been there for a while, as well as other external third-party products. Of one to call out is on the Microsoft ecosystem. We're trying to expand as well, but I'm sure Jan might call out a few of those when he does the deep dives in the second section. When we are looking at the connectors a little bit in more details, let me just jump to those. Here is the list of the third-party products. I'm not going to go through every single line, but I wanted to put it onto the screen so you can quickly skim over what actions you can see. And when we go into the details, you will start to understand what actions mean a little bit more details as well. But just for this slide here, whenever you have an integration, and in the definition of those connectors, the connector itself has pre-configured actions of what you can do with that connector. So if you're looking at the Jira software one as an example, you have things to, for example, get the comments from Jira, or to create an issue on the Jira side. These are actions that are defined as part of the connector, right? And this is what we deliver when we give you access to those connectors. You then afterwards, with the template, utilize those actions. And when we include the out-of-the-box templates, we've already done that based on the understanding that we have for the use case. And I'll take you through a quick use case on an MS Teams integration in a minute, where we take those actions and apply procedure logic or business logic towards the execution of utilizing those actions. And here, it's at the end of the day up to, as in the limit is the sky, when it comes to you guys utilizing those actions to support the use cases that you see. So that we're going to go into the details how you really build this. Jan will do that live. But this is already a first glimpse of what we have. And as I already mentioned, we'll expand on those. Jumping to the next slide, I'll highlight a few of the connectors that we have for our own products, where you can see exactly the same thing, where you have predefined actions that are part of the connector. There are different levels of how much you can do. So to call out our own two products from a product line perspective, the SMAX actions, you have more actions already in the out-of-the-box connector than the service manager one. From a roadmap perspective, we are looking into which actions are required for which use cases, and we will expand our connectors with additional actions where we do it, and down the road, we have the intention to actually open that up and letting you potentially define those actions as well. That's a roadmap statement. I can't tell you yet when we will allow you to do that. As of today, the actions are defined by us, Micro Focus. What you as a partner customer can use today is the templates and the configuration of the templates. As in using those actions, there you have the flexibility to do whatever you want with those actions. All right, quick overview. So if we're jumping to what I called out as an example and a walkthrough of an use case or an integration, I will take Microsoft Teams. So we are sending, and we've had this for a while. Sorry, jumping back 2 steps back. When we talk about an integration with Microsoft Teams, you actually have multiple use cases you can think of. So one of them is that you want to, and this you see on the print screen, you want to send, for example, in the context of a major incident or a virtual cab for change approvals, you want to send a tile or a message into Teams to inform and collaborate further on that case inside Teams. And you're seeing a print screen here of the definition of that template on the left-hand side, where you have the definition of the fields and how they map over and how you populate the values into this. And on the right-hand side, you have a print screen of how it looks like inside Teams. Now, this is what you're seeing here is what exists already today. We are actually also, roadmap statement again, we are working on improving that integration even to make it possible to even be more flexible of integrating with MS Teams and do more actions. That's a roadmap piece, but just for your information, I want to give you a little bit of a forward-looking view as well. So here we are taking, as in that context of that major incident, we're sending it to Teams, but we're also taking the records back with comments back into that incident ticket, as in the example here. But going back to that helicopter again, you can also look at Microsoft Teams as a one-to-one chat conversation. So I, as an agent that works on a ticket, I would like to ask a question towards the other person, for example, the one who requested a ticket, or another person that works in IT supporting tickets. So you want to do a one-to-one chat. You can do that as well. It wouldn't use this setup here that integrates to the channel. It would use a setup of a one-to-one chat utilizing a custom action. That's status today. Tomorrow, that's why I called out the roadmap, you would also be able to use that through the integration engine. And then the last one, which quite often we are getting questions about, is that we are getting the other use case that is being discussed is that I'm an end user scenario. I'm an end user and I want to be able to, via Teams, create a ticket or interact with SMAX through the Teams interface, but the backend should be SMAX. Now, some of that we can already do today by embedding the SMAX UI into Teams. It's just an embedding of the UI, so it's not a full native integration into Teams. But we're also looking into, and once again, roadmap disclaimer here, to how we're going to support that end user initiating a conversation and an interaction with our SMAX backend through a more native experience inside Teams. Not what we're talking about today, and that's not what we're representing here with the integration engine as of current status, but I just wanted to highlight that when we say integrate to Microsoft Teams, you can actually look at 3 different streams of use cases and consumptions of how you're actually interacting with Teams, the way we see it. If you're seeing additional ones, feel free to write it into the chat if I missed one. I would like to hear about it. So digging into that use case to take you through a little bit how that MS Teams integration works, and already explaining the graphic you see in the upper right-hand corner, the aspects of what is automated and what is a user action. So the bold color-filled boxes are user actions. The ones that are a little bit lighter highlighted are automated. So as a tenant admin, I'm configuring that MS Teams channel in SMAX. So for example, for that major incident management example that you saw on the print screen before, then there is a connection between SMAX and MS Teams, which is called out here as register the Teams channel subscription to receive the updates. You need that subscription to be able to receive the messages back. So SMAX, in that configuration of that Teams channel, I'm subscribing to that Teams channel to be able to pull the messages that happen on the Teams side, to pull them back into the history of or to the updates, whatever I do with them, back into SMAX, so I can keep my ticket up to date with what is happening on the Teams side. And then as a tenant admin, step number 3 here in the sequence or in the description of the use case is that I can then define the business rules in the different entities that I want to do this in to be able to trigger that integration. So to call this out a little bit more is we're not limiting a Teams integration for major incident only, like it was called out in the first step. You can call a business rule, or you can define a business rule to call that integration for whatever entity you want to. If you wanted to, for example, go to contracts and you want to make a collaboration for what you should do with this contract, you would write the business rule on the contract entity and call, when the business rule triggers, that integration towards Teams. Or you could do it on a person record. So there's no limits on where you call that business rule, as long as that business rule is available within the context of the business process, where it makes sense, right? We're not supporting every business rule everywhere, but that's maybe obvious. Then, once all of that is configured, the SMAX user, when he then works and has here in the case of the major incident again, there is an incident, she will trigger or she will update the ticket. In the major incident context, it is setting the flag, which is then the trigger to call that business rule and make that update into MS Teams to make that tile and initiate the collaboration, which is the second pink box, which is an automated action. So the data is sent to the MS Teams channel. And then you have your team and your collaboration in MS Teams, where you have that MS Teams channel member that will chat, and most likely there's going to be multiple messages in Teams, and they will then be picked up from that subscription that we did in step number 2 here in the drawing and brought back into the source record on the SMAX side. In the scenario of the major incident, it would go back into the incident as an update. I hope that makes sense. It also, to my team, in case that there's a question, just interrupt and I'll focus on the question. So if we go further towards the next slide, and here I want to take you quickly through what do you do to start a new integration. I'm making this rather quickly. It's print screen, it's 5 slides to quickly show you what the steps are to create a new integration. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining every single screen because Jan will do that in the live demo. I'm doing it here to give you a quick overview to show you and showcase it to you with print screens on how easy it actually is and how quickly you can create such session. A bit of a call out for the ones who are not aware of this. Jan actually even did a demo in one of our user forum sessions where he's gone through the creation of a Slack integration. Right, that video exists, so that session is recorded, and you can go and watch it on demand, where you can see that in those 45 minutes roughly that we had, Jan created an integration into Slack, right, with defining all of it, 45 minutes integration done. All right, so now, of course, Jan knows what to do, but still, it's a showcase, and it's a really good showcase of how quickly you can build integration using our integration solution with that new integration management views that we're going to take you through now. So first screen, you've already looked at it. You will create a new integration and you choose that connector that we've already talked about. You then look at defining the endpoints. And Jan will go into the details of what those endpoints really are. Just to call out here, the endpoint, you have multiple options to define how this endpoint behaves. So for example, print screen number 2 with the big box on the bottom left, where you choose the authentication type. So you can choose, depending on what the connector is, what kind of authentication you're going to apply. Or you're going to get to the point of where you choose if that endpoint is an agent-based endpoint or if it's an agent-less endpoint, meaning goes through OPB or doesn't go through OPB, as an example. And then the third step where once you've done that, you've set it up and you have your connection established. Oops, I went one too far with my slide. Sorry for that. You have that established, and then you can go in and you can monitor your endpoint to see what is happening with your connectivity because you've established the connectivity. And here we've done, for the ones who know SMAX and you've worked with integrations before, we've done quite a few updates of adding more valuable information into that UI. So you're seeing that on the right-hand print screen, where you see more details of the responses, and you can actually get to the point of seeing the error message itself without having to go and find the log file on the server to go and find out what actually happened. And you can easily see in the request details and the response details on what is actually passing through. And here you can then monitor, and you see that on the left-hand side, what is skipped, or if it's success, or if it would have failed, it would be red with the status. Then you come to the point of what do you do with that integration point, where you start defining the rules, where you go in. And here, Jan will explain this a lot more details. Don't ask me to go through every single item here, but you can right away see with what I called out before on the prepare data section, the right-hand side of the picture, where you see those pre-configured entities that are part of the integration that you can drag and drop and work with to make your lives easier to actually do this. And then lastly, after you've done that and you've gone through all of this, in case that you're building it from scratch, you will have a whole list of scenarios where you manage those scenarios afterwards. And you can see here in the print screen with the process logic, all the different steps that you go through and where you handle and process your data for that integration. So that's the 5 slides where I just quickly took you through what it will take. I am done with my section, so I'll quickly check if we already have questions or not, but I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I'm not seeing any, and colleagues correct me if I missed one. So we're getting to the point where I'm handing over to Jan Steibe, who will take the next section of the session, where he will start with a few slides. Yes, there he goes. So I guess you can come off mute, and I will go on mute.
Thank you, Philip. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. And also from my side, a huge welcome to our SMAX September event, and especially for this week, which is all about integrations. As Philip started to explain, we talk about integration engine today, and I will give you a little more details about this new solution in our product, how it's working. First, I give a quick overview about the components we are leveraging in this integration engine, that we have a common understanding of the different elements which I'm referring to during this session. And then I jump straight away into a live demo to show you how endpoints are configured, the different integration options, but also some administrative tasks like how to package integrations that you can then deploy them into different SMAX tenants. And also we do a little session, a little bit of introduction into how you can debug these integrations you are configuring. So next to this session, I'd like to also highlight that we have in parallel a hackathon, integration hackathon this week ongoing. So in case you are interested in more tips and tricks, additional information, or if you have questions you didn't get answered today, or just from experience point of view, you need to know more or want to know how to do certain things, feel free to register for these hackathons today as well. And then, we will give you every day this week additional information about this new solution in SMAX. So let me go straight to the components. So what components does this integration engine consist of? We have first the endpoint. Basically, this is the part where you configure your connection details to the system you want to integrate with. So for example, if you want to integrate with Jira, you have to set up the Jira authentication method, username, password, the SSL certificate, for example, that the integration engine can successfully connect to the endpoint. Then the connectors and actions, that's what Philip mentioned, this is provided by us. So we define them, the connector. For example, a connector is just a definition in the backend of the API of the endpoint you want to connect to. So in the Jira case, we have defined the Jira API here that you can easily use this throughout the creation of the integrations in SMAX. And each connector has a set of actions which basically define then the behavior of how to communicate with the endpoint. For example, if you want to get records, to create records, update records, or any API actions, whatever the tool is providing might be reflected then in the actions. But as we said before, this is at the moment provided by us. Perhaps in future we open that part for the connectors that you as customer or partner can build your own. And then the next thing where you basically mainly do your work as integration and scenario area. An integration is just an umbrella, basically, which can then bundle different scenarios you may build against the endpoint in one grouping area of the UI. And the scenario itself does basically the work you need to do, implements the business logic to make your integration working in your system with the use cases you have in mind, with the data you need to exchange. That's all part of scenario. And the scenario is simply a set of rules which are executed in sequence and then is doing the job. So how is this all linked together? I'd like to show a quick component diagram here. As you see, different elements are highlighted here in this overview. We have the endpoint, and an endpoint, of course, exists in the backend for the local SMAX system. This endpoint is always there, and also there's a current local connector to the local SMAX system, which has all the actions defined, represented in yellow here. And on the right side, you also see an endpoint to your target application. So that means this is your endpoint to any external system you would like to integrate with, which is configured then in the SMAX endpoint area. And in the middle, the purple section basically is using those two endpoints, the current SMAX one and the target one, for your target system. And then you can define your scenario, which includes a set of rules which run in sequence to basically implement the logic you need to implement to make your integration working. So you can add as many rules as you want, either against the local system to get data, to update data in SMAX, or against the target system to collect data, to send data, to orchestrate or to realize your integration. So that's from conceptual point of view. And now I'm going to share my screen and show it live in the system. Is my screen visible now? My SMAX system. Philip, can you confirm, please?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So as you see, all starts with an endpoint, and that's why I'm here in the endpoint section in SMAX. And I'm not going to do a new one, but I want to show a little bit how different integration options, especially from authentication point of view, can be used to successfully connect to that endpoint. So let's check in the first step the Jira one. The Jira is a quite simple one. It supports basic authentication still together with an API key, and that's what we are leveraging here. So first of all, since my system is in the internet and Jira system is as well in the internet, so publicly available, I selected the agentless method to connect. So that means in this case, I do not route my traffic through an on-premise bridge. But in case the system you want to integrate with is behind a firewall, you can then also select an agent from here. So agent is the on-premise bridge configuration you can do in the agent page of SMAX. And then all the traffic would go through on-premise bridge to then connect to your endpoint. So I selected agentless here, and then from authentication, I selected basic authentication because that's what Jira is supporting, and that's a quite easy method to connect. And then in this case, you simply configure your base URL, your username, password, and the certificate from Jira to connect to it. So that's it, a one which is straightforward. But let me show you a little more complicated. For example, a Workday endpoint. Workday has such so-called two-step authentication requirements. So basically, I use agentless again because Workday is also a SaaS environment where we can connect to. And this time I use the generic authentication type. And the generic authentication type allows a lot more advanced authentication methods to configure. So for example, here I still need to configure my base URL, but here I also need to configure my authentication URL because the authentication URL is different than the normal URL you use for the REST calls then where you get records or update records in Workday. Certificate is the same. And now, as part of this generic connector, you see a bunch of additional features here you can use to make this authentication work. Of course, you need to know how to connect to Workday. That's prerequisite by reading the documentation. But just an example here, I started to configure encrypted data. Encrypted data means any sensitive data you want to reuse then further on in this authentication mechanism, you can set up first here, and then you see the sensitive data is no longer visible in clear text. You can assign the value to parameters here. I use the refresh token authentication. And then I simply add my header, and this is still the authentication request. So this authentication request will go against the authentication URL. So I do my data here, my header, I send plain text, I send my authorization header, which is in basic authorization with my sensitive data coming from here. So I created this parameter here, and then I refer to that parameter $authentication by this syntax. So $authentication at runtime will include the encrypted data what I saved here in the value field. And same for body. To connect to Workday, you need to send a body as well. And that's the plain text body, as you see. That's why we have the header here. You send refresh token, and then refresh token as a normal text. And here the token, again, coming from my sensitive area section here, where I can refer to. So this is then required to authenticate against Workday in this case. And then when we authenticate successfully, we get a response. And the Workday response includes a body, a JSON payload, which has certain keys, JSON keys in it. And one of it is the access token. And this one we need to parse. And here again, we can add additional parameters. I call it token here. I select from where to get the data from. In Workday case, it's a body. So I need to parse the body to get my token. And then I use the JSON syntax $.access token to parse my body and then assign the value from this JSON response to my internal parameter token. So once I have done this now, for any subsequent call I do against Workday, get data, update data, create data, I simply send this authorization header with my BIRA token, which I pass from here. I know it's a little more advanced, this configuration, but authentication is not simple. It often requires additional steps, but we have now a very flexible way to configure this in our solution by passing different HTTP elements, body, cookie, header, for example, for the data you need to successfully authenticate. Let me show you another one, Octane. Octane is also an advanced one. Again, it uses generic. Similar concept here. I set the encrypted data. I send the encrypted data in the payload towards Octane here. And then I pass the response. And this time I pass the cookies. So I select the cookie here, and then I enter the cookie name to assign the value of that cookie to an internal parameter. And then again, for every subsequent call after authentication, for GET requests, update requests, I send these parameters here. One is part of the header, my Octane user, and the LWSSO cookie key. I need to send a cookie with the parameter here. And that's an example how you can parse this data, how you can refer to the parameters you have defined further on, which hopefully enables you to successfully then connect to the endpoint. As an upcoming feature, we will add, this is also roadmap, additional authentication types like OAuth 2 support. This is then planned for the next release. Hopefully we can include that. But this list will increase to allow you even more options to connect to different endpoints. Since I'm sharing screen, I don't see the questions anymore. Are there questions so far which we should answer live?
Where's my view button? Yeah, there is one. So I don't know, you want to look at should I read the question for you, Jan?
Yeah, since I'm sharing screen, I don't see the questions at the moment. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm reading the question as it is here, so I'm not sure if the question makes sense. Otherwise, we'll ask you to specify it out. Maybe answer to my query is already in future session. How do you import certificates from Jira into SMAX? So the question is really about importing the certificate.
Yeah, we don't import it. You know, you can download Jira certificates from your browser directly when you connect to Jira. You can save it as text file, CER certificate. We have documented this step, and then you simply copy paste it here into this section. It's a manual step. We don't provide an import button or feature like that.
Yeah. Then there's a second new question that just came in. Mm-hmm. Is the authentication call sent each time for every operations throughout the integration, or is it get at the beginning of the scenario which is executed? Some third-party system have the limit of timeout for the authentication tokens.
Yes. So basically, we cache the cookies and the headers we set, and then use them. And we only authenticate again if the cookies, for example, are expired, so the system can recognize this and then run in the back authentication call again to connect. So we don't execute it at every single action during the integration. We check if the credentials, cookies, or tokens are still valid. If yes, we use them. If not, we try to re-authenticate. And if the second re-authentication fails, for whatever reason, we flag then the task in an error in the endpoint, which I'll show you in a moment how this looks like.
Yeah, I'll wait with the last question because that will probably come later. So yeah, okay. That's for the questions for now.
Okay, good. Then, yeah, as a next step, I'd like to jump straight to the integration area of the integration engine. And in the first step, I want to show you quickly how easy it is to basically create an integration. I pick maybe ALM Octane. You pick an endpoint here. So basically, these are all connectors we provide. And this is the May version of SMAX. In November version, you will see additional connectors, Workday connector, for example, or Asset Manager connector, and maybe some others. That's what we have at the moment. I pick Octane. Of course, then you need to select the endpoint you have created first. I select the ALM Octane one. I click Save. And then I have my integration group created here. You see SMAX Timber. And now I can simply add a scenario. I can pick a template. I do not show a template at the moment. I will show that in my next step then. So I also want to show you how you can start with a blank integration. You don't need to pick a template. But you see for Octane, we have defect tracking, enhancement tracking, and pull status updates. I select none for the moment. I create that, and you see I have now my blank canvas here to build my integration. And how does it work? As I started my introduction in the PowerPoint with the components diagram, we have the current endpoint, which is our SMAX system we are working on. We have the target endpoint. In this case, it's the Octane endpoint I just selected when I created the integration. And now I simply can add rules either to execute a rule against my current local SMAX system or against my target, which is ALM Octane. So let's start, for example, with a get record action to get data from SMAX. You can put it here. You can maybe give it a different name to be specific. You can also change the description if you want to. And then you can configure your details you need to execute this get record action against the SMAX system. Filters, you can enter a normal filter using the SMAX standard REST filter API. So this is documented very well to configure that. In this case, I would filter for ID 12345 against the incident entity. Here I can specify the layout. For example, the layout is the fields basically you want to retrieve from the database. For example, description. So in this case, I would the call would return ID, display, priority, and description. You can specify how many records you want to get and how many you want to skip. So that's really a simple action you can run, and then you can define an object name. It's up to you how you call that. It's really configurable. And then here in the property section, you can define your parameters you want to use then in the next step of the integration. Let's call it key 1, and typically this action is doing a GET request against SMAX, and it returns you, when you execute it, a JSON payload. If someone of you know Postman, how to integrate with Postman, you know the JSON payload structure of SMAX, and then you can pass it here quite easily. Response data includes the response, and then you may want to say entities is an array. You want the first element, properties dot description, for example. Of course, JSON parser. And let's call this description to be specific. And of course, you can pass the properties only into your own parameter, into your own variable, or you go down to every field of a SMAX incident. It depends how granular you need it here. That's just an example. And now you see the object I created is also visible in the right-hand data panel here, where you can then remember what different parameters and variables have been created already. So now let's do another step. You can go here and do a prepare data step maybe, because you want to manipulate the data. And here you can say my changed data. So you can define what you need. And then you can do here description. And here I want to remove all HTML tags of that field. If you know SMAX, description is a rich text field which contains HTML, and maybe your target system doesn't support that, so you want to strip out HTML tags, and that's how you can do it. You define a prepare data task. You can define unlimited number of variables with the data you need, and then use parameters you created in previous tasks, rules, and then use it here in your logic. And then, of course, you can add another step, create record action, for example, with against Octane. You see here, create record, target ALM Octane. You can configure your response fields, comma separated list. So it's predefined. You know, if you know the Octane, how to connect, you can define that quite easily. It's well structured. Defect, you can enter it here, and then you add your payload here. If you want to send maybe the description to Octane, you can simply then use my data, my change data, and then it would be passed to Octane. Of course, this is just an example. This is not complete. For Octane, you need to do a little more. It just should illustrate then how you can put different steps in this integration engine. And now these steps are all executed in sequence. It starts here, then prepare data, then create record. You can also skip rules if you if you write a condition here. You set it to false. So if it evaluates the false, the condition, the rule will not be executed. You can then, if you want to write something back into SMAX, you can then simply add a new SMAX rule here, and then write some data back into SMAX, because when you use this one here and create a record, you can get also a response from Octane, right? Every read REST call, you receive a response. You can tell it here, my Octane response, and then you can pass the response as well, similar as I did in the example before, and then assign that, and then once you have the status back, or maybe the Octane ID back in the response, you could then send it back into the SMAX record to write a comment or to update your record to basically configure your end-to-end logic. And as I said many times already, these steps, you can put as many as you want here. There's no limit. For example, if you need to collect more data than just here from an incident, you can add several SMAX get record steps in sequence to query your incident first, and then maybe some related entities for additional data which you don't get by default in this request, to collect the data you need and then concatenate everything you want and pass it over to your target system. We have a couple of more features here in this logic. When you click here on the pencil, there's a settings feature. And basically here you can decide if a task or a role should continue or stop when a failure happens. For example, a failure may happen if your authentication fails or if you cannot connect to the endpoint because network problems or other issues. You may then want to set here, turn this off, and then that means it will no longer stop at that point in time at that role. That's the default value, and whenever error happens, it stops at the role where the error happened. It will not continue. But if you turn that feature off, then it will go to the next step and does the job. So that means in case of errors, you could create your logic to create an incident automatically, to create a request or any other record in SMAX to inform basically someone about an error in your integration. So just keep in mind, by default, this is turned on. Whenever an error happens at one of the roles, it will stop at that role. If you don't like that, or if you want a special error handling, you can turn it off, and then the scenario will continue, and you decide then, based on your conditions here, which step is then executed in which case. Okay, that was just a brief introduction of the general functions we have in this UI. Philip, any questions for now to answer first before I then start my next topic where I select a predefined template?
Yeah, there's two questions. They're a little bit all over the place, but it's still fair to call them out. Yep. So the first one is there a generic integration for REST calls supporting payload authentications? Maybe you want to show it as well.
We have one generic connector. So we have lots of predefined connectors to specific products, Octane, ArcSight, Operation Orchestrate, Power Automate, and so on. But we also have a generic connector. Let's demonstrate this to show you. Of course, you need to select an endpoint always, right? That's basically in the endpoint you define how you authenticate. Let me pick maybe OO just as an example. Okay, now again here, we create a scenario. We don't have templates here for generic connector. And then in the generic one, we have simple get, patch, post, put, delete, standard REST actions you can run. For example, if you put the REST request, you have to enter your URL, which is appended to the base URL and your endpoint. And then you configure your payload here basically to define, here's the response, but here you enter your get request URL basically, and then you can pass the response again into my object, into an object you create yourself. For post request, you can then of course add your payload here, right? Key 1, my value, key 2, for example. And then, of course, the URL defined by yourself to who to post the data. But again, you always need endpoint because endpoint is managing the authentication towards the target system. I hope this answers the question. If not, please come back and we can talk a little more about this.
Yeah, thank you. And the second question, different context, and it's more a forward-looking context, but I think it's worth that you spend a few minutes on it. is there an out-of-the-box integration for Azure, as in pipelines, PBA creations, etc.?
You mean Azure DevOps? Is that
I'm
yes.
assuming that, yes.
So if it's about Azure DevOps, yes, we have plans to deliver that soon, and out-of-the-box integration to create defects, features, such kind of data in Azure DevOps, similar to what we have at the moment for Jira and ALM Octane. So if feature and the issues are not sufficient for you, please come back to me. I'd like to hear a little more about your use cases you're planning to implement towards Azure DevOps.
Yeah, that's all the questions that are active. Thanks.
Okay. So you have seen now how it is if you create scenarios or integrations from a blank page. So basically you need to do all yourself. You need to know the get commands, the get rest codes, the post payloads, all these things you need to know already. Now, as an opposite, I want to show you how easy it is to use a predefined template, because that's what we really want to achieve. We want to give our customers a jump start that they don't need to build the whole entire logic from scratch themselves. They can do, but they don't need to. And in this case, I want to use the Jira example here, and I click Add Scenario. And then since you see I have already a defect tracking and post status update scenario here, I now do an enhancement tracking. And for this one, I use one of the predefined templates. So in this case, I select this one here, the enhancement tracking. And now you see a bunch of roles are now preloaded into this scenario here. And if you follow our documentation carefully, you will notice to run this scenario, you only need to configure first your endpoint. We did that already. And then you need to configure those placeholder URLs here, these placeholder parameters, the Jira URL, issue type, and project. So let me briefly do that for you. Issue type. Of course, this is details you will get from Jira. And here, the URL. To then browse through that record once it's exchanged. So if you use our template, again, all you need to do is the endpoint and set those 3 parameters, and then the integration will work. I demo this to you, and then I explain in details what this scenario does, that you get a little more background about this integration and the templates. So now I activated this integration. The endpoint was already created. I go to Studio, and for the sake of simplicity, I create a new custom action, create record in Jira. So then let's give it a friendly name. It's a workflow action. Let's pick this one. Let's show as primary. Position and grid page we don't need. So I create a new custom action here, create a record in Jira. Let me copy this again because I need this. And then to trigger an integration, once you configured it, you need to add a business rule into your Studio process. So I decided a change request should become a feature. So I picked the change entity here. I go to applying changes section. I click add. And I select call integration engine here. That's the business rule to use. And now I configure I select my integration, Jira, and I select my scenario name, enhancement tracking. And then, okay, let's copy that to be faster. So, and of course now I need to use my custom action name again. So that's basically how a custom action can then trigger an integration. This is documented, the syntax, and I guess some of you have used this already. Custom action count is an internal counter. So if this is changed, and this is only changed when the button is clicked, and my custom action name is create record in Jira, then this business rule is triggered, and it will then go to send a request to our integration engine, and we'll start the Jira enhancement tracking integration. So let me just double confirm now that my spelling is correct with the custom action name. And of course, in reality, those conditions can be much more advanced. Like here you see in one for Octane, I created also custom action to create a feature, or that means without clicking any further button, when the comments have been added, for example, then this Octane integration, for example, is triggered. So this is just for now for this demo here, but these conditions can be more complicated or more advanced depending on your requirements, in which case such integration should be triggered. So now let's go to custom action. Again, create record in Jira. Let's double confirm that. Okay, nothing changed. Great. Let's now go to my changes. Let's refresh. Let's take anyone, doesn't really matter. I have here my button, create record in Jira. And let's simply click it and let's see what's happened. So now with this, we trigger the integration. And then in parallel, if you go to endpoints, I need to go to Jira endpoint, and you see it started already. Now, since we are here, you see every action, every rule we have in our scenario is listed as a different line here with all the details. For example, if you go into this one, into this action, get record data, you will see the request details, but also the response details. And then, of course, the output, which every task is producing. In the output section, you may remember you can define your object and then your keys, your parameters, which you then use in other steps. This is all documented here, which will then help you also to debug in case of errors. But now you see this integration successfully run. Let's go to the change. Let's do a screen refresh. And you see now here is an external assignment tab where the Jira ID is tracked. You can then click here. Okay, might have been, I did something wrong in my configuration. Let's go, let's fix that. Let's log in. And you see the record has been created in Jira. Labels is set, priority is set. I'll show you in a minute how all of this is configured to successfully create such a record in SMAX. The main point was now to how easy to show to you, to demo to you how easy it is when you use one of our out-of-the-box templates. It will really speed up the process to set up those integrations. Of course, it may not fit 100% the use cases you're looking for, but at least you have a baseline to then continue on and enhance it and improve it and change this. So now let's go step by step through this integration. You see here I made my mistake. I forgot this slash, now we can fix it here in this parameter section, and next time it should work properly. So here, again, to remind, I only set those parameters, and I had to configure the endpoint, of course, but that's all you need to do if you use our templates. And all other templates are similar, simple. All of them have the default parameter section where the required things need to be configured to then successfully use the integration. So default parameters is clear. This is just a prepare data task, right? You can find it here in the comment section. And then I gave it my object parameter and then defined a couple of variables here, which have certain values assigned to it. And then remember here, you can find those things in the right-hand data panel section. So the next step, we get the data from SMAX. And here it's another get record action against current SMAX. You can see this here nicely in the UI. And here we use a variable which is not yet visible in the data panel section, but this will come soon. This is documented only. And payload.entityType, that's basically one parameter which is passed over from the Studio business rule. So whenever Studio triggers this business rule called integration engine, payload.entityType and payload.entityID are passed automatically to this integration. And then you can use it here in your queries back into the SMAX backend to get the data you want to exchange. So what do I do here? If it's triggered from the change request, this is now my change entity. The payload entity ID is the change record ID, which is then used in the filter clause here. And then for layout, I use full layout and relation layout to basically get all data attached to that change record for further processing. But this also means here, you see now, since this is dynamic, this enhancement tracking template or defect tracking template is similar. It does not just work for change entities. It also works for request entity, or it works for problem entity. These things are considered, so you don't need to use it only for changes. You can use it from any other entity in SMAX as well. And then again, we do the input parameter, basically specifies the data you need to successfully perform the REST call into the backend. Then you get a response, and here I parse the response. I give it the name SMAX record to object. And then I pass different properties out of my response into these parameters here, because I want to then use it in further steps. So for properties, for example, I do JSON parser response data dot properties, which contains basically all the simple fields like description, priority, title, user, assignment groups, and so on. These details are all in the property section. Related properties means business service and then related data to it. I also check if the call was successful or not. I pass attachment and user options, for example, in this scenario. Then there are a bunch of other activities. For example, I do here if an external reference record exists. So in this case, since we use the case exchange API, so-called CES API, you need to have an external reference record. I do that check here, another get record. If it exists, I do nothing anymore. If it does not exist, right here I say, if external record exists, no, then I create it here with this step. So you can see you can orchestrate or do a lot of actions already before you even call the endpoint. This is all happening against the local SMAX system. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps are all against the local SMAX system, 4 steps. Then it's the first time I reach out to Jira, check if record exists. If it exists, we update it. If not, we create it. So that's how we do it. We check in this case, we saw the Jira ID and the external process reference. And SMAX record.properties comes from our second step, get record data. You see here, SMAX record.properties. That's it, what I'm using here. And then, of course, you need to know the SMAX field name, where the data, where the Jira ID in this case is stored. You need to then append it. In future, we also will enhance this slightly to make type ahead working. So that means as soon as you add dot something, and then it will propose you the configured parameters automatically, that you don't need to type all of those things on your own. But this is something we have in the backlog. So I do a get request against Jira, get issues, right? I do a search, and then I check if it exists. I return yes, otherwise no, and I pass the key, the ID, and the status in my Jira record object then. And then here, the magic for all the data manipulation happens in the prepare data step. Here I pass my attachments, for example. I do a filter against my comments. So for example, this is a rather complicated function. it does a string aggregation. It means it loops through an array and aggregates all array elements into a string, but it also does a filtering and a JSON parsing. So here I pass the comment, basically element in SMAX. My filter is only of comment type external service desk, which is filtered, which was maybe then added the last minute. That's what is filtering, and then I return the comment which have been added into SMAX backend. Or for example, for priority, this is also a nice DSL, and that's what we mean with low-code functionality. We have DSLs here where you can maybe map the SMAX priority. You know, SMAX priority is low priority, but Jira understands only low, so you need to send low. We convert low priority to low for Jira, or medium priority to medium, and so on. So there are such functions available, and I'll show you in a minute all the list of DSLs we have already available, where you then can manipulate the data to basically meet the requirements of your target system. There are a bunch of string manipulation methods, such as enum, translator, or other functions available, which can do quite some functions to prepare the data you need. In those areas, we also support if, else if conditions. So we have if something matches. Here, for example, I check for the request if the user option has a description field defined. If yes, I use the description from the user option. Otherwise, I use the standard SMAX description field, for example. These are just examples to illustrate how you could basically use this to match, then to implement in your requirements here. That's another complicated one. And then here we create the Jira issue. There's an action create issue where you define your payload. This special syntax indicates that this is a nested JSON payload with arrays and objects mixed together. This is documented very well how you can use this syntax. The payload preview is not yet fully ready. It does not show the real payload, but this will be fixed in the upcoming release, where we show the real payload based on the configurations you do here in the payload section. And then at the end, one more thing. For Jira, we also send all attachments across. And here I'm using the iterator function we have available in the integration engine. So the iterator function you can add to your logic in the comment section, apply to each. And then when you use that, you can loop through JSON arrays. Data.attachments is the JSON array, and it will then basically first, in this case, you can add roles into the loop. You can add, you can loop through an array and then do certain actions against every element of the array. In the first step, I get the SMAX attachment. Then it's downloaded into a local repository of the integration engine. And in the second step, I upload this attachment to Jira. This works for embedded pictures in description fields, but also for normal attachments in the record itself. All of this is then uploaded together in case you configure such roles in the system. And then, I add a Jira comment under certain conditions. And last but not least, I update the SMAX record here to write back what happened to the exchange, if it succeeded, if it failed. I write special comments here, for example, record successfully created, in this case, plus the Jira ID, or record not successfully created in case of failure, or in case of update, just record updated. So again, some ideas, some examples, how the template writes data back into the SMAX backend where the original call came from. This is in brief how an integration can be configured. Of course, I know every integration has different requirements, probably different steps required, but I hope with these templates you have a starting point that you then can enhance it and add missing or additional logic based on your requirements. Any questions so far?
Not on what you showed, but there is a question that's somewhat related. Is there a roadmap question in regards to do kind of a pop-up notification for the business rule? So the example that was written down is when you push that action button, that custom action that you did for create record in Jira, to show a message that the scenario has been started, similar to that green bar on top for saying incident has been saved. Is that something you're looking at?
We have that in the backlog, but at the moment this is not available.
Yeah, that was the question.
Yeah, I don't know yet when we are able to deliver that, but that's clear in the backlog. We know other customers ask for a similar requirement as well. Yeah,
there's no other questions.
Okay, so this was the explanation of this Jira template, and other templates are similar. Some are more complicated, some are less complicated. It really depends against which system you want to integrate with and which templates we have set up so far. Now, in terms of administrative tasks, that was one agenda item. Once you finished this integration and you have successfully tested it in your dev environment, you can then download it. Now, let me save it first. You can download it from here. You click the three dots, right? You select export, and then you can pick which of those integrations you want, either Jira, all of them, or just defect tracking or just enhancement tracking. And when you click OK, it's downloaded as a package. And in your target system, you simply click import, select your package again, and then you have it uploaded to your target environment. Important to know, endpoints are not automatically part of the package. You need to manually create the endpoint first or after you loaded the integration. In case the endpoint name matches, so you have a Jira endpoint already in your target system, we reconcile this endpoint. So then if the name exists, you can use it again. And then it's also pre-selected here in the target endpoint section. If we cannot match an existing endpoint in your target system, target SMAX tenant, this is empty here, and you need to then pick your endpoint again manually after you imported the integration. That's how it works at the moment. And also from debugging point of view, I started to show this already, but here in the endpoint, you see all the different rules which have been executed against Jira, against SMAX, and simply drill down here to see the request details, the response details, and then of course the output details in case you have configured those, where you then maybe find areas where to help troubleshooting. Let me check if I have an error here. Yeah, here for example, you see in case it failed, you see something like this, and then issue does not exist or you do not have permission. So you typically see quite quickly what went wrong here, and that you can then correct the scenario or the integration. Okay, that's what I planned to show for the integration. I walked through basically how you can use it, the different options we have. I know there's a lot of content I showed today, which with a lot of capabilities. Some of you probably need to digest this and practice this first before questions come up. But I'd like to remember to highlight again, we have this hackathon this week, the entire week, where we only talk about the usage of what I have shown today. And yeah, in case further questions, more technical questions coming up, feel free to join those sessions to discuss this with us. Then last but not least, let me go to the help server to show you where all of this is documented. Go to our SMAX documentation in the integration section, integration management, integration engine. Here you find all the details documented, what I have just shown to you live in the system, how to use the engine, how to export, import what I just displayed, the different connectors, the different scenario templates, the use cases here we implemented, that you get an overview how you could use these use cases from catalog offerings, from the backend, from change requests, from incidents, and so on. This is all documented. But also here, expression language, what the language is about, basic syntax you should follow. All the DSL functions we have, index of, length, lowercase, uppercase, JSON parser. So all the DSLs we have in place so far. This list may grow in future releases, but that's what it has at the moment. And also a page how to basically write JSON expressions in the integration engine when you configure your payloads for your target systems. So you can add simple key value pairs, or in case you need more complex JSON payloads, you can then also use this notation here with the greater lower sign to basically build such payloads here. You see here's the example how you configure it in the integration engine, and that will be the result basically, which is then sent to the target system. Or a more complicated example here. That's how you configure it, and that's the final result of that payload. And last but not least, we have also a quite huge how do I do section. How to pass responses, for example, is documented here as example, or what else is one nice one? How do I update a user option? It's also documented here. How do I reuse parameters in the same rule? So that means you can have here parameters defined in sequence, and you can then reuse them in the URL key at the bottom. All the parameters you defined before are then reusable in the next one. Or how do I debug? How do I dynamically specify shared space and workspace? So quite some how-to examples to hopefully answer some of your questions already in case you get stuck.
And
that's all I wanted to show today. So I'm happy now to answer questions.
Before we jump to that, Jan, you were on the integration page before you jumped on here. Just to add on to this, those integrations that we've talked about are, as Jan has already shown, documented. You see them in 2 tabs, but we also have it on our Integration Central.
Let me show this as well. If you go to the main page, you have here Integration Central, and then you can go SMAX, right?
Yes.
And see these things.
And
now, for example.
And for the ones who know that page, you might see that this is changing. So we've done quite a bit of work in the last 2, 3, 4 months to improve this page to be a lot more consumer friendly. So you directly get to the data that you want to see, definitely structured, simpler structured, so you didn't have to click through so many sections to get to the point of what you're really interested in.
Yeah.
So
because from here, from detailed documentation, you get redirected straight away right to this page here where you can then search for your service now in this case. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jan. If we can show the slides again, Alice, sorry. Coming out of the blue with that question. Jan, you said you want to go towards the QA.
If there are questions.
There's no questions in the question manager. So if there are any questions, please do write them into the question, and we'll try to answer as they come in. Otherwise, we are seeing the slides, I would assume. Yes. Otherwise, I'll jump to the closing section of today's session. So to call out 2, 3 items here. One of them is that you as a reminder for the support request, in case that you have issues, you can go to the SMAX portal and do a support request. for a trial channel to get help. That's a reminder. If you've been with us, you've seen this slide before. That's a slide we have on all our sessions. And then if there's any other larger or queries that are not in the context of getting actually support request help, or if you want to give us feedback, or if you want to add something, or you have concerns with accessing the session in an replay fashion, feel free to write us an email and contact us on smaxdember@microfocus.com so we can help you with your query or your feedback. So as a heads up or a call out for what's happening tomorrow. So tomorrow there is a session on integrating AWS Connect and SMAX for a seamless customer experience. This session tomorrow is again a half an hour session. So as already said in the beginning, today we deliberately made a longer session to go through the content and all the explanations that we wouldn't have been able to squeeze into 30 minutes from everything you've seen today. So tomorrow is a half an hour session again at the times 5 p.m. CET and 9 a.m. in the morning in Mountain Time, I think MT stands for. And then the last, as in leaves us open. I'm not seeing any new questions coming in, so we can stay on here for another minute or two to see if any last questions are written in the question managers. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you, especially Jan, for the demonstration and the deep dive in explaining how the integration works. We hope that you've gotten a nice view of how simple it is to actually work with our integration, especially the scenario where you're absorbing what we deliver, the templates we deliver out of the box, so you can get up and running very quickly. The example that we looked at today with Jira, but this of course applies to the other templates that we deliver as well. There is also the area that you as a customer, as a partner, from a content perspective, you can of course also produce templates. Let us know if you have any use cases that we have not delivered out of the box, but you think that they are valuable to others. Please feel free to reach out or upload them to the marketplace. That option is something that is coming down the road as well, that you can do this. So we're definitely interested in delivering good templates. And if you see that you can contribute with templates, please let us know and reach out either to me or to Jan, and we'll engage with that. Then thank you to you, the audience, for attending and sticking around for almost a full 1.5 hours. We're a little bit early here, 8 minutes before the end of the time, but I think we can round it off today and say thank you very much and see you tomorrow.